I'm sure that you've seen this in another class, but just by way of reminder, the elasticity is measuring the response in quantity that is due to changing the price by 1%. So, for example, if the price elasticity of my favorite meal, the salsa, is -2, then we can interpret this as saying that an increase in the price of 1% will reduce the quantity of salsa sold by 2%. So for practice, here are a couple of elasticities to think about. One for sugar and the other for movies that are shown in the kino theater. So if you would take a couple of minutes to think about how you would explain these elasticities to your grandmother, to the babushka, and also why is it the case that in magnitude the elasticity for movies is much larger than it is for sugar. A couple of minutes, and then we will come back together as a class to consider these questions. Thank you.
May I answer the question, sir?
Yes,
So for sugar, the demand elasticity is 0.3, which means that it's inelastic. And for movies, it's 3.7, which means that it's elastic. And movies are higher in magnitude than sugar because we don't require them in our life as much. So they're not as necessary as sugar.
yes, you're on the right track. However, we're talking now not to other economists, but instead to your grandmother, Babushka. And she does not understand what you mean by inelasticity and elasticity. So can you do a more direct interpretation of the elasticity of sugar being minus 0.31? What does it mean? You are on the right track.
May I try, Professor, please?
Yes,
So in terms of elasticity for sugar, for example, the person, as you said, babushka, for her, sugar is very important because she cooks, she does something. But in terms of movies, I think that babushka will seldom go to movies. And that's why she doesn't really need movie tickets. And for her, it is critical if the prices will go up. So she will buy much less movie tickets, for example, in 1 year. But if price for sugar increases, it does not really affect her consumption because she needs sugar for her, like it is for her own needs, for her interests. It's more valuable for her than movie tickets. So the price decrease or increase is very critical for her in terms of movies because it's more like a luxury good or maybe the goods that she doesn't really need much movies. But sugar, it's like a necessity that she can live without.
yes, I enjoy your observations about your grandmother. I should note that technically a luxury good to any economist is a good for which the income elasticity is greater than 1. In other words, if your income rises by 1%, your demand for movies, shall we say, increases by more than 1%. It has a rather typical interpretation.
Oh, sorry, I was wrong with like calling movies luxury good. It's not a luxury good, but I'm saying that it's for her. It's like a more like a not a privilege, but something that she doesn't really need. For her, it's like a seldom purchase that occurs like I don't know, like one time per, for example, like 2 months. She doesn't take it very often. So for her, it's more like a very seldom spending.
That's fine. Yes, you're using the practical interpretation of luxury, and that's fine. The only problem is that sometimes economists don't use words the same way that normal people would. And then also, I'm looking for a definition, a common sense definition of elasticity that your grandmother can understand. That's what I have in mind. If I tell my grandmother that sugar is inelastic, she will have no idea what I mean. What is inelasticity? So how about this? When the price of sugar rises by 1%, the amount of sugar sold falls by almost 1/3 of 1%. That's what I'm looking for. And by the same token, for movies, if the price rises by, let's say, 10%, the demand for movies will go down by 37%. And now we can think about this interesting question that I've addressed. Why is it the case that movies are more elastic in demand than sugar? And I think I've heard from others that the reason is that movies are not as essential to us as sugar. But on the other hand, I could argue, I think, that sugar is not essential either. So why does price have a greater impact on the demand for movies than it does on the demand for sugar? But let's see. I agree with Adep and Mirai that movies are an elastic good. And one reason may be that we have so many substitutes available. We don't have to go to the theater, to the kino, to entertain ourselves. Instead, perhaps we can stay at home and stream a movie rather than buy the ticket at the theater. Many cool substitutes are available. Now, for sugar, it is hard to think of many substitutes, fruits, artificial sweeteners. However, most people strongly prefer sugar to those alternatives. and they're willing to pay for that choice.
Excuse me, Professor.
Huh?
Does
Go
it
ahead.
mean that? Thank you. Does it mean that goods which have many close substitutes, they are elastic?
They're more elastic than another good with the same characteristics, except that it lacks substitute. Yes, that's right.
Oh, thank you. I understand.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I understand.
Oh, okay, good. Also, as I think Levi suggested, sugar for many people comprises a large share of their overall budget. So looking at sugar as a tool or as an ingredient in other goods, you may find that many people spend a lot of money on sugar relative to the amount of income that they have. And even better example may be bread. It's interesting to see that in middle income countries, when governments try to raise the price of bread above the subsidy level, they often run into political barricades, even riots. Movies, on the other hand, don't usually command a large share of income. At least not these days. In the 40s and 50s, I should say the 40s, before television became ubiquitous, just at that time, people spent a lot of money on movies. And that was the golden age for cinema. But that seems no longer to be the case. So the key point is that we have inelasticity for goods that comprise a large share of our budget. I should say small share. And so I will turn this around. Sugar is inelastic in demand. So one reason for elasticity is that it does not have close substitutes. And also, people may spend, I should say, a smaller share of their income on sugar than on, let's just say, housing. But relative to other foods, sugar seems essential. So we have elasticity for goods that, moving almost constant, are easy for us to absorb a high price for because we're not spending that much money on them anyway. But you see pens selling at high prices, maybe because people buy a pen and afford for once having a high quality good. And we have inelasticity for goods that lack those substitutes. But sugar. And then finally, we have inelasticity for goods in the short run rather than the long run. Because in the short run, we don't have enough time to gather information about substitutes. So a good example of this may be oil. I mean, say crude oil. When the price of oil rises rather suddenly, we find that revenues earned by oil producers are also rising. The demand for oil is inelastic in the short run. But after a year or two, people find ways of getting rid of oil as a necessity and instead using a cheaper substitute. In the long run, people conserve energy. Electrical energy. To avoid high oil prices. So the elasticity for oil is larger in magnitude in the long run than in the short run. And in addition, in the long run, energy producers respond to high oil prices by extracting more oil from new deposits or by coming up with new technologies like fracking or new substitutes altogether with the solar energy. So there is in uh, in the oil sector reasons in demand and in supply for a greater elasticity for oil in the long run rather than the short run. This is a problem that Kazakhstan often faces. We tend to think that we will have high oil revenues for a long time because for a few years we had high oil prices. But in reality, in the long run, people will find ways of getting around expensive oil. So let's see what we know about movies. Many substitutes. So they have a high elasticity. Just as it's so easy for us to stay at home instead of going to the theater. Also, movies played, I think this is fair to say, movies played a small share of our income. So ostensibly, this should mean that we are willing to splurge from time to time on films because it does not cost us much money. It is a treat that we can afford from time to time. So thus films should have a small elasticity, but in fact they don't, they have a large elasticity. So it appears that the substitutes are so effective with respect to movies that they increase our elasticity of demand for movies, even though movies are really not that expensive in terms of our entire income. And then finally, in the long run, they found ways to perhaps enjoy the movie without going to the theater. A copy may become available over the internet, and the studio itself uh, may create a copy of the movie shown on TV or through DVD players. So this contributes to the high elasticity of titles. So in short, consider these factors. Then you want to know whether a good is likely to have a large elasticity or small one. Other close substitutes. Does the good command a large share of our income? If it does, we are going to be careful about our spending on that good, which means that it is uh, very sensitive to price. And then finally, how much time do we have to make a decision? Will be in the short run or the long run? In the long run, we have more time to find cheaper substitutes. So elasticities are larger in magnitude over the long run than in the short run. Okay, so far on these three criteria for elasticity. So I think that's good for 5 points of extra credit for the class and 2 points for IJET and URI. Here's another puzzle that you may have done into from time to time when you are going home for a study break. Why is it the case that airlines will discount prices when travelers say that they will stay overnight on the weekend? This puzzle too is good for 2 points of extra credit. So what do you think?
Professor, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Many airlines, at least in the United States, will offer a discount on the ticket excuse me. They'll offer a discount on the ticket price if you will say that you will stay overnight in the destination on the weekend. So there is one ticket price to people who want to return at any time. That ticket price is usually pretty high. And there is a lower ticket price for people who stay in the destination, for people who say that they will not return home until after the weekend. And my question is, why is that the case?
May I answer this question, please?
Yes,
So I think it is because it happens due to price discrimination. So because people who can fly to some destinations over the weekend, I think they have like a bigger income, bigger wealth. So they are more price indifferent. But for example, people who buy tickets in advance, for example, like buy tickets in advance, they get lower prices because they are more price sensitive. Like people who plan their holidays like 3-5 months in advance, they want to purchase tickets at lower prices. But people who, for example, buy tickets at the very last time, at the very for the very closest time, they are more price different. For example, maybe they go there for a work trip, business trip. So for them, it is not so important how high the prices are because they just have to go. They have to go, or they, for example, for a business trip, or for example, they are like wealthy people. They don't care about like spending a weekend in the other country. So for them, it's like it is like a relatively small portion of their income consumption of, for example, of a lot of expensive tickets.
so you have identified two reasons why ticket prices may be low for non-business travelers. First, those travelers are planning their vacations well in advance. So the fact that they are reserving a flight 3 or 4 months in the future is a signal to the airline that they have a high price elasticity. The business traveler, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Professor. Yes, I agree with you. Like people, because of their price sensitivity, their price sensitivities affect their elasticity for demand of like different goods. For example, especially airline tickets. For example, I heard that American Airlines, they have like more than like 300 different offerings. For example, like they spread the price tickets for the same like destination, like by more than 300 different criteria. For example, purchase this day or another day, or for example, goes to a business trip or goes on the vacation, and like also looks at the um, what class, like first class, business class, and like so many tactics of price discriminations that can help to increase companies' surplus.
Yes,
Companies, yes, surplus, profit, companies' profit. So like each person pays the maximum of their availability. Like they pay maximum how much they are ready to offer. So company gets a lot of profit from each person with um, different income levels.
yes. So the airline is trying to gather information about its customers. It wants to know which travelers are, are sensitive to price and which travelers are not sensitive. So the thinking is that if you plan far ahead your uh, your flight, you must be fairly sensitive to the price, and therefore the airline will offer you a lower price than to a business representative. Yes, that's good. So with those examples of elasticity and inelasticity, let's think for a moment about how to compute the elasticity, and then we will talk about how to categorize various goods in terms of the price sensitivity of a given amount. So this concerns not a precise point elasticity, but instead an elasticity that is an average of over part of the demand function. And as you said, the elasticity is the percentage change in quantity due to a 1% change in the price. And basically, that's what the formula here says. Except we are going to measure the relative change as the change in quantity relative to the average price, and the same thing of the average quantity, and the same thing for the change in price is relative to the average price. So here's a puzzle for you. Then comes down to the demand curve for batteries has a couple of points on which we already have information. And we will assume that demand is linear. On one point, the price is 2,000 tenge. At that price, we know that we will sell 100,000 batteries. And then on the second point, the price is 3,000 tenge. At that price, we will sell 150,000 batteries. Can you take those 2 points and compute the elasticity for a couple points of extra credit? So you have a couple minutes to work on that problem. Can you see the slides?
No, we can't see. We don't see the screen presentation.
Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. A couple minutes to compute the arc elasticity in this case.
Professor, sorry, it disappeared. Or it's back.
You can see it now.
Yes.
Okay.
Elasticity is 50.
Say again.
The elasticity for demand curve is 50, isn't it?
Did you say 50?
Yes, 50. The quantity over price.
Let's take a look. So let's shift to the whiteboard. And let's look at the demand function for batteries. So there is our demand function. And we have information about 2 points. One at the price of 4,000 tenge. Oh, sorry. Let's try that one again. And at the price, you can sell 100,000 batteries. And then our second point is for a price of 3,000 tenge for the battery. And at the price, you can sell 150,000 batteries. So we want to come up with an average elasticity for this range. So 4,000 to 2,000 tenge in price, and for an increase in batteries of 50,000. So let's see. Our elasticity is equal to the change in quantity divided by the average price. So all of that is in the numerator of the elasticity. And then in the denominator, you have the change in price. Relative to the average price in the range. So it looks a little bit messy because it is messy, but I think once we get our hands dirty, we will see this really not so bad. The change in quantity is 50,000. And then the average quantity, this is not right here. I'll just call it average Q, is 100,000, that point, plus 150,000, this point. And then for the average quantity, we will divide all of that by 2. So this is the average quantity in this range right here. And as you can see, just from the graph, the average quantity is 125,000. Okay, so help me out now. As they're moving from this point, we'll call this point A, to this point right here, point B. We are moving from the high price to the low price. So the change in the price is minus 1,080. There is a relative change in quality. And now we're going to work on the relative change in the price. The price falls by 1,080. And then the average price is clearly of 3,580. You can deduce that just by looking at the graph. So the elasticity is the relative change in quantity divided by the relative change in price. The relative change in the price is minus 1,000 divided by 3,580 or minus 10 over 35. Now we can compute the elasticity by dividing the relative change in quantity by the relative change in price. So this is 50 divided by 125 in the numerator. That divided by minus 10 divided by 25. So let's simplify this to be 10. 50 over minus 10 is minus 5.
Elasticity is minus 1.4.
Yes, I think that's right. Good. Or to simplify it once again, the same as 35 times 5 divided by 125. So that's about 175 over 125. Or just a little bit more than minus 1.4. Yes, good. So would somebody like to interpret that, the elasticity?
May I try,
Yes,
please?
please.
So the demand for batteries is elastic. This means that um, batteries have couples have some substitutes that really affect change in price of the for the batteries, and that's why the price is elastic. People are sensitive to the price, and also batteries are elastic due to very small share because they take only a small share of the income. So like people don't really um, they switch from one batteries to its alternatives because when prices change, because it is elastic, demand is elastic.
Yes, I agree that maybe the elasticity is greater than 1 in magnitude, partly because there are substitutes available.
Yes.
However, I'm, I'm not sure that batteries comprise such a large share of our income that they're going to worry about on those grounds about the price. I think maybe batteries are elastic mainly because of substitutes.
Yes, professor.
Um, but on the other hand, this entire uh, example is hypothetical. I'm using numbers here that are easy to work with, not necessarily because they are realistic. So you said that this elasticity is elastic. How do we know?
Because
Go ahead.
because the absolute value of the elasticity is greater than 1, so
Good.
it is not an elastic or unit elastic, it's elastic.
Good. So a good is elastic and with respect to price. If the elasticity with respect to price exceeds 1, then just an absolute value or magnitude. So what does it mean? It means that if price rises by 1%, the number of batteries sold will fall even more steeply by 1.4%. The change in quantity is greater than the change in price in relative terms. that is in specific terms. So why does that mean anything to us? So consider the total revenues for batteries is the number of batteries that we sell times the price. I'll call that PQ. When we change the price, something is changing in the opposite direction. So when we raise the price, quantity will fall more steeply than the price will rise. So this means that our total revenues will fall if we have an elastic good. Yes, we make more money than before on each battery that we are selling. However, we are not selling very many batteries. Now, suppose instead that we have an inelastic good. And when does that occur? When the elasticity now is less than 1 in magnitude. That is, now the change in quantity is smaller than the change in price. Again, in percentage terms. In this case, what happens to revenues when we raise the price? Do revenues rise or fall in this case? Now, total revenues will fall. Yes, quantity goes down, but we are earning so much more money per unit of sale that our revenues will rise overall. The rise in the price more than compensates for the small fall in quantity. A way to see this is to consider a case in which the elasticity is zero. There is no change in quantity due to the change in price. total revenues will rise. For instance, if we raise the price 10%, then total revenues will rise by 10% because there is no change in quantity. So I've gone over time, so let me stop there for today and invite you to finish reading chapter 4 in the textbook for tomorrow. The main point from this discussion is this: if the good is such that the price, charge a low price, if you want to increase revenues, people care about your price. But if the good is not such to the price, stick it to the consumer, raise your prices.